Welcome and thank you today for joining us for building an efficient document management process. Everyone joining today will be in listen-only mode. There will be a recording of today's session, and we will be sharing a copy of the recording post-webinar. If you would like to ask questions during today's webinar, I invite you to take advantage of the questions box, and all questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Next slide, Jeff. So today I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. First joining us will be Jeff Geshay, OPEX Business Alliances Manager. During his 24 years at OPEX, Jeff has worn many hats. He came to OPEX as a sales engineer and has since been a product specialist, VP of sales, and most recently a business alliance manager. In this role, he currently manages a diverse portfolio of authorized OPEX resellers, ranging from remittance to enterprise content management solutions, as well as several with specific digital transformation and workflow specialties. We also have joining us today Arun Kumar, EXL Vice President, Operations and Account Manager. Arun has been with EXL for more than 13 years with experience in operations management, contact centers, document management, solution and process design, program management, customer experience, transformation, and re-engineering and quality assurance. Arun is a qualified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and practitioner, currently leading EXL's digital intake operations for insurance and finance and accounting clients, responsible for new client implementations, transitions, service delivery, and client management. In his prior role with EXL, he led the transformation and process excellence functions for some of the top U.S. insurance clients, especially in the P&C and life and annuity space. Thank you both for joining us today. And with that, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Colleen. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you, Arun, for being here today. And I want to thank everybody who's joined us for today's seminar. Hopefully it will be beneficial to you as we move through many of these various thoughts. We're going to have kind of an interview format today. So basically, we're going to discuss, Arun and I, how they were able to successfully put together a really efficient solution in their Virginia facility. So we'll go through a little background. We've done that. We'll talk about the software and hardware challenges, their search for a solution, the process they went through, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll look at some really hard results that were possible because of the way that they went into this whole project. So as we begin, give you a little background. Arun, perhaps you could talk to us about EXL. Give us a little bit about EXL and how you position that company in the market.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me, and greetings to all the participants, and trust everybody and their families are doing great at this point of time. EXL, we are a leading operations management and analytics company that helps clients build and grow sustainable businesses. We serve multiple industries, including insurance, healthcare, banking and financial services, utilities, travel, transportation and logistics, and many other industry verticals. We specialize in domain, data, analytics, and digital technology, which helps us to design and manage agile, customer-centric operating models to improve operations globally, drive profitability, enhance customer satisfaction, and manage risks and compliance for our clients. We are headquartered at New York. We have more than 31,000 professionals and growing, and you know, this is a global operations. And as part of our operations management as well as analytics, as I mentioned earlier, document management plays an important role in how we service our clients. And so at all times, we are looking at improving our performance and our proficiency in this area. Thank you, Jeff.
Arun, thank you. That's a good background. Before we get to some of the specifics, let's talk about your Virginia location. I think that was a document managed location, and you had some opportunities that really pulled our two companies together. Can you give us a little bit of an idea about what were some of the challenges that you were having there in Virginia?
We do have a large scale operations in the heart of Virginia, and as I mentioned earlier during our introduction, that as an organization we are always looking at improving performance, customer experience, and being more agile. Now, a year and a half into our operations, when we set up this new operations, we realized that there was an opportunity to improve our cycle time, especially on the financial transactions, because we were dealing with checks, we were dealing with documents and customer requests, which were related to stock exchange and the pricing associated with it. So there was an opportunity there with respect to improving cycle time. We looked at our reporting structure on real-time updates for our customers, for our clients. We did see an opportunity there, and we wanted our business to be more predictable, and there was a potential to build more resilience in our operating model. And that's when we started the entire evaluation of what better we can do from a software perspective. And that's where we got in touch with Highland, and Highland recommended OnBase as an end-to-end document management workflow, which can provide us streamlined business processes across multiple lines of businesses that we're managing. Also included robust reporting modules and with integration capabilities across multiple admin systems, which in fact I can certainly say has today led to improved cycle times, better tracking, traceability, and profitability for us.
So it's all about being able to get insight into what you were doing. What was the nature of the work? I mean, did it come in boxes and file folders and envelopes? What was the major incoming receiving paper there?
So we primarily were dealing with three types of inputs. Paper, I would say approximately 40 to 45% of our total volume, and then the remainder was digital intake in terms of emails or faxes. But of course, when it comes to document management, paper is the painful element. Management of paper, making sure there is traceability, there are audit trails, and these are scanned in time so that we are able to meet the required SLAs, was an imminent part of our operations.
So you mentioned scanning. That means that there was a hardware component to some of the opportunities that you were looking at. How did the hardware challenges manifest themselves, and what were you noticing in the scanning process from a hardware perspective that you thought needed to be addressed?
Right. So, when we talk about cycle time from an end-to-end perspective, and you break down the different stages of the document management process, and if I kind of correlate to the volumes that we were managing, as I mentioned earlier, 40 to 45% of our inputs were paper. Now, we were at that point of time, did have a lot of popular high-speed batch processing scanners. But what we realized our biggest bottleneck was to make sure that these high-speed scanners were operating at their peak speeds. We had to feed these scanners. And for that, we had to make sure that we had an army of people who were responsible for primarily opening letters, prepping and batching document sets, stamping date and time, inserting patch sheets for doc type and envelope identification, tracking and detecting checks, pasting smaller pieces of documents, and stuff like that, which was kind of adding to a lot of human handoffs. I would say anywhere between 4 to 5 handoffs before the document actually reached the scanner, and even post scanning, weeding out checks, weeding out patch sheets so that these could be reused, certainly added to a lot of inefficiencies, or I would say a lot of opportunities here to reduce the cycle time. And that's where Highland recommended that, hey, why don't you evaluate OPEX They not only have a seamless scanning process, but at the same time, they have enhanced reporting modules which can seamlessly integrate with the workflow. And that's where the journey started with OPEX.
That's good. Well, first of all, thank you, Highland, for mentioning OPEX along the way. So the key drivers, and you mentioned some of them here, is that in your organization, you had all different types of workflow, but I did pick up on one thing there, your quote that says we had an army of people, so a high percentage of labor. And then you talked about all of these, tracking the documents and the handoffs and all these kinds of things. And you did mention the high-speed scanners need to be fed at their scanning rate. What, in this process here from handling the paper, could you identify any particular labor touches that were most problematic?
Labor touches were most problematic. I would say the entire prepping and sorting process, because once you picked up mail from the post office, brought it at the site, post opening up those letters or the envelopes, you had to defold them, and then you have to go through the documents, make sure that everything is in order. Small pieces of paper, small checks, you have to make sure that they don't fall off the prepping desk. So the risk of losing paper was very, very I would say imminent, in terms of making sure that every document, every page, every paper is tracked, and then we had to make sure that there was always somebody doing audits, looking at the floor, looking at the trash bins and stuff like that. So the biggest risk was of losing documents at the prep stage.
And that leads perfectly into check processing, because you're mentioning you had to make sure that you were tracking those all very, very properly. And you also mentioned, I think, that these came out of envelopes. So when they came out of the envelopes, was there a different workflow the way you were currently set up to the check processing? Did they go different directions? Check go this way and regular documents go that way? How are you handling it?
Yeah, so again, the solution was very manual to start with, and of course, there was a manual detection that was involved when it came to check processing. So we had to weed out all the checks and the associated check documents from the entire pile of doc sets that we received from the post office. And then we had to make sure that these checks were scanned separately, again, to make sure that there is enough tracking, and from an SLA perspective as well, these checks were being pushed through ahead of the regular documents. And of course, from a deposit perspective as well, these checks had to be weeded out from the doc set so that these could be deposited for payment processing. So very, very manual, very, very, I would say, exposed to risks. And then, of course, from a scanning perspective, we did not at that point of time have the capability of extracting MICR reads in terms of the check amount or the check number, routing numbers, and stuff like that. So, which in a way added to our processing time within the indexing arena.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in opening the envelopes and taking the checks out of those envelopes. And you were trying to measure this process too. So there was a reporting component, right? Where stuff was, where paper, certain checks, all that was in the reporting process. What was your black hole as it related to reporting? Can you name one, or were there several?
So, when it came to paper, there was certainly a big black hole that we had, I would say, because see, when it comes to email or faxes, you already have the metadata that is coming in with the email or faxes in terms of the entry time or the receipt time of that particular document. But when it came to paper, see, there are multiple data points, right? One is your pickup time from the post office. The second one is when the envelopes enter the facility. The third data point was when it started prepping. And the fourth data point was, when did it start scanning? Now, unfortunately, at that point of time, till the time the document was not scanned, everything was being manually captured on paper, or somebody had to enter that manual log onto an Excel sheet or a reporting module for us to start tracking, or even to realize what kind of volume should we be expecting for document processing downstream. So I would say probably 1.5 to 2 hours. You had to wait to realize what volume was coming in.
So
go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
No problem. I'm trying to make sure that I understand the process you were looking at. So you were evaluating it, and you talked about getting it from the post office, what time it was opened, what time it was prepped, the date and the time on there, all these manual steps, right? So factors and steps. And as you were doing it, before you got to your full efficiency, there was a lot of manual steps along the way. And then you just didn't have some of the metadata that you really needed, like micro information from the check. So there really was some great evaluation here. And I appreciate you providing this list of some of the things that you looked at along the way. So you were looking in the right direction. And as often as I see manual, that means labor, right? So a lot of labor thrown into this manual process. Can you elaborate a little bit further? What was I heard you say earlier, again, a small army of people, but from a scanning perspective, how did that impact you?
So from a scanning perspective, as I mentioned earlier, and even the slide that you had brought up, a few minutes back here, because it was so manual, and as I mentioned earlier, we were touching every document probably 4 or 5 times, right? So receiving of letter, opening the letter, prepping the letter, tracking, and inserting patch sheets, handing over to the scan team, and post scanning, weeding out checks, as well as certain critical documents, and then archival. So you're talking about, in an end-to-end scan operations itself, you're talking about 5 to 6 human touches, which would entail a lot of people, just to make sure that to meet our client SLAs, we had to make sure that everybody was present at the same time, feeding those scanners at the speed at which, at the optimum speed of those scanners.
So speaking of those scanners, I think you said you had traditional, high speed, batch fed type of scanners. How many people do you think it took to feed each scanner? In other words, you had to try to keep up with it. You mentioned that a couple of times now. I got to keep up with the scanner. What was your labor component as it related to the scanner?
So apart from the scan operator, we, on an average, had approximately 2 to 3 people aligned or feeding that scanner.
So doing the prepping and getting it ready, inserting patch codes,
right,
and things like that. Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Correct.
Thank you for giving me that motion. So you went searching for a solution, and I think based on the reporting and some of those other kinds of things, that you set a priority here as it related for searching for a solution there. And you mentioned it earlier as well. One of the first places you went was to Highland OnBase to upgrade your software. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So as it relates to OnBase, that's a product that is produced by Highland. What were some of the feature sets that drew you to OnBase? Why did you choose to go the route of upgrading to OnBase?
So OnBase provided us something which was very seamless when it came to workflow, and with very less coding or scripting. It was more of like I would say a point-click configuration. And the best part that we felt at that point of time was that, hey, and because it's such a modular structure, it's very flexible, and the documents never moved from one state to the other, because it was like a one database. All it did was changing the reference of that document, but the document always stayed intact. So at all times, we were able to trace and track documents from a reporting perspective. So that was number one, which was very important for us to make sure that, hey, at any point of time, a customer calls in, or our client would call up and say, hey, where is this particular request? I can easily get into the system and tell them that, hey, this is under review, or this is under processing, or an output has been generated and you should be expecting in the next couple of minutes, so on and so forth. So that was number one. Number two, it's integration capabilities with external systems. We have a lot of lines of businesses that we interact with, a lot of admin systems, and there's seamless integration with those admin systems, both on the input as well as on the output front. So that was number two. And number three, it does have enhanced reporting capabilities. I can track it at an operator level. I can track things at a line of business or a product level. And it can help me set up productivity measures, our SLAs. And we also have what we call as the physical records management module, which helps us with long-term archival, and we can exactly figure out where the document is post-scanning, so that at any point of time a document needs to be retrieved, we can do so.
That's great. So a very robust software system, modular in nature, so that I would imagine if there was a different kind of module that you needed, they might have something ready to be able to plug into your existing workflow. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So in the process of choosing software, that's taken care of. I'm sure you began, kind of configuring what you wanted that software to look like. You said earlier, I'm going to pick up on it again, that it was actually OnBase that said you need to look at some different scanners to include the new OPEX scanners. So what did that process look like for you from the very beginning when you started looking at hardware?
Right. So OPEX, as I mentioned earlier, OPEX did come in as a recommended solution from Highland. And, while we understood, or I would say realized that there were opportunities to improve cycle time, or I would say process efficiency, right at the scanning stage. And we were evaluating other suppliers as well. But because OPEX came in as recommended, we included OPEX as one of the suppliers, and did go through, we had an extensive checklist that we had internally created to evaluate all the factors that we wanted to improve. And OPEX, the best part that I felt at that point of time with respect to OPEX was that, unlike other suppliers who were providing us with virtual demos, or I would say scripted demos, we were actually invited by OPEX to visit a couple of their production sites, or I would say clients in the East Coast. And we were asked to interact with those clients. And that was pretty unique for us, because we wanted to make sure that we are not seeing something which is a demo version, which is normally a pristine version. We wanted to see something in action, and then we actually wanted to talk to somebody who was actually doing stuff. And during the evaluation process, certainly it helped us validate, because not only did we speak with the project managers at those locations, but we also interacted with the scan operators, because we wanted to understand what was their day in the life, and what kind of hardships, or I would say improvements, were they seeing from before and after. And based on the evaluation, what we realized that OPEX was one of the key components that we should include as part of our solution, integrated with OnBase, which would help us reduce the upfront wait time, and improve our end-to-end cycle time, eliminate multiple handoffs, and make the process much more mechanized or automated than being labor intensive. Reduce the operating cost, and then, because we don't have to then invest in patch sheets, tapes, stamps, and all those things. Improve our check processing, and then it was kind of seamlessly integrating with OnBase as well. and of course, improve reporting and audit trails for end-to-end traceability along with long-term document storage.
So from the OPEX scanner and the reports that are part of the native system there, being able to feed directly into the OnBase system with not only the images that you're capturing front and back and the audit trails that you can spray, and then the electronic metadata. A couple of practical things, right, that you saw as it related to how many touches you needed. Can you describe what you learned in the process of visiting a couple of those sites?
So, when we went there, we immediately coined, this phrase of one-touch scanning, because, what we saw there was that, once the envelopes came in through the door from the post office, it never left the scanning desk. And that's why we started calling it the one-touch scanning, because if you look at the scanner, it's one scan station, and the unit comprises of an envelope feeder, a slicer, a conveyor belt, or a roller, or a set of rollers which constantly feed the scanner. Then you had automated envelope detection, check detection with Micker reads, automated audit trail imprint, critical document outsort, and real-time QC, all at one desk being managed by one person, unlike the earlier process wherein, as I said earlier, we had 2 or 3 resources touching each envelope before it reached to the scan operator. So, those were the unique features, or I would say unique element that we felt would bring about a big change in our environment in order to reduce some of the cycle time impact that we had earlier on.
Great. So I appreciate the details that you shared and what you saw, what you were looking at, what meant a lot to you. So we're coming to a decision point, and the process that you went through to get to your final decision. I'm going to put up again the chart that we showed a little bit earlier, and this is a chart that came from you. So you looked at the factors that were a problem all manual before, and now that you're looking at the OPEX scanner, you're realizing that many of your bottlenecks, your manual bottlenecks, are handled by the OPEX device. Am I saying that correctly? This is your chart. I'll let you explain your chart.
Yeah, correct. See, what we were looking at, again, going back to the age-old Lean Six Sigma methodology, you look at, what are your non-value added activities, and what are your essential non-value added activities, and what are the things that can be automated or eliminated. And, what you see on the screen right now is exactly what we followed. What is that can be automated, and what is that can be made redundant. And an OPEX kind of facilitated and still is doing that.
Great, thank you very much. So we made a decision. Obviously, we're presenting today to share the information that you learned and that we have seen with other OnBase customers, that it really is about bringing all the pieces together, a software component like OnBase, as well as a hardware component like OPEX. So you've made your decision. How did the implementation process go? What were some of the key things that you saw during the implementation process that you thought were very beneficial to you?
So during the implementation process, obviously at that point of time, we had our workflow requirements from an OnBase perspective really, finalized. So we kind of finalized our business requirement, and that's when we went back to OPEX stating that, hey, here is our requirement. And at that point of time, we evaluated, we required approximately 6 Falcon Reds, and with a certain configuration, with certain, workflows and stuff like that. And OPEX was open at that point of time to understand our requirements, and they customized certain elements of the scanner. I would say these were made for us and implementation was pretty seamless for us because we had OPEX technicians, and since OnBase was familiar with OPEX, integrations and data feeds were pretty seamless. We did not see a lot of challenges, in the installation as well as the configuration of the scanners happened in parallel with the workflow implementation, and we were in fact able to test it much before the final workflow was ready to be tested.
And there was some end-to-end testing then just to prove the concept as it related to everything's ready to go?
Oh, yes. So we went through the entire norm of, your agile methodology of, making sure that everything was tested at a component level, everything was tested at an integration level. And only when, it was pretty evident that, yes, this is the operating model that will work for us, we went live, I would say around about 2015, 2016 timeframe.
That's great. Thank you for the details there. So from an implementation standpoint, and to again compliment our friends at OnBase, they have a similar philosophy as it relates to ingesting into their system as OPEX does into exporting into the OnBase system. It's very straightforward metadata files. It's very straightforward TIFF or JPEG images, depending on the needs of any particular client that you might be processing. And it does integrate quite seamlessly, including one of the bigger problems that they had earlier, and that is processing checks on the same scanner, reading the micro lines, reading any OCR lines that might be on payment coupons. So the implementation process into the software that you chose was seamless and very easy to do. Easy may not be the word, straightforward, something that you could handle without a lot of problems. So at the end of the day, after you're implemented, there were some great benefits that you sent along to us. Do you want to talk about some of the benefits that you got, maybe even some of them that you didn't realize you would have at the beginning of the process?
Yes, certainly. As I mentioned earlier, reporting was one of the most important components that we were looking at, or I would say the factors that we were looking at, and an amalgamation of OPEX as well as OnBase did provide us that capability. So today, I exactly know as soon as the envelopes enter our facility, we are able to track those documents. We are able to track that volume because there is no heavy prepping or sorting that is happening today. Everything gets fed onto the scanner, and it's pretty seamless from there. From a downstream perspective, because we do manage a lot of stringent SLAs like 2R SLAs, 3R SLAs, the entire elimination of wait time, because now instead of batch processing, the downstream processes are receiving documents seamlessly, in regular, I would say, frequencies of, a minute and a half and things like that, because there's no stopping. There's no batch processing, to be honest, because you do not have to bundle up all the documents to feed into the scanners. You can scan a page at a time, and the conveyor belt or the rollers would feed in seamlessly, and hence there was a complete elimination of wait time per se. Check processing has certainly improved because we are now getting MICR feeds. We are getting vital information from the check, which is then feeding into our indexing processes. So now, from an indexing perspective, our check processing is more of a QC, wherein which we're just verifying that the information being read out of the check is correct. Because at times there are home printed checks and stuff like that, which may need manual correction. And from what we call as from cradle till grave, we are able to track each piece of mail, where it is in the system. And even post that, the unique aspect is that we imprint an audit trail on the envelopes for long-term archival. And that happens at scan time. Unlike the previous version, wherein which we had to pull up all the documents after scanning, box them up, and then create a manual log. In today's scenario, everything happens automated. We are able to put an audit trail on the document. We are exactly able to configure where the document is going to reside post scanning, and then coupled with the physical records management module of OnBase, we are able to establish which aisle, which rack, and which box number is the document being has been archived, so that tomorrow, because of any requirement, we have to pull up that document. I can easily go to that particular document and pull up that piece of paper from the archival.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My compliments to EXL for not only seeing the opportunities, which have now positioned you to be a great service provider to other customers down the way, and to be able to say to us, we believe we've got a very efficient process, where once it was not as efficient, you made a whole bunch of improvements, and I appreciate you talking about some of those improvements along the way. Thank you, OnBase, and of course, the OPEX Falcon device. So one last nebulous question here, as it relates to specifically the support you get from OnBase and the support you get from OPEX. So something goes a little bit wonky. How has the OnBase support been for you?
So, just like any platform or workflow, when you invest in, such things, you have to hone the capabilities of managing that end to end as well. So, we do have OnBase support resources who would take care of the maintenance, the patch updates, backups, and stuff like that. But at any point of time, there is an issue which does happen. I would say once in a blue moon. We do have level 2, level 3 support, a phone call away from an OnBase perspective, and we do also utilize their professional services in case there is any heavy change that is required from a workflow perspective or from a integration perspective, which if at all is beyond the capability or the skill set of our maintenance engineers. That's the only time we would reach out to Highland to kind of garner their help. But since the time we've implemented OnBase, it has been pretty seamless. We've not seen many technical issues, and I would say it's much more efficient as compared to what we had earlier. That was on OnBase. But if I were to talk about OPEX, for us, maintenance is twofold, because it's a physical equipment that we are dealing with. And as part of the implementation, when the OPEX engineers were on site, our scan operators were trained by them to take care of the scan equipment on a daily basis. This is like a regular cleaning, alcohol swabs and stuff like that, to make sure that, hey, every next day when you come in, you get a clean equipment and you're running through the process seamlessly, which is something that we do. We are following these schedules that have been recommended by OPEX. The second component is the technical support, which bifurcates into periodical scheduled visits by the technician, and he would come in as per our maintenance agreement, look at everything is running fine, conduct thorough cleaning, and replace any small parts that may be required. But in case something goes down or something stops working, we can immediately call them on their support line. And on an average, what we have seen is somebody would be there physically at our site within, I would say, on an average 2 to 2.5 hours from the time the ticket was raised or when we made the actual phone call.
That's the goal. The goal is to support customers as you're supporting your customers as well. So again, thank you, Arun, for taking some time. And at this point in time, I'll turn it back over to Christine to help us with some of the questions that may have been submitted along the way. Arun and I'll try to do the best we can to answer some of those questions.
So far, we don't have any questions that have come in. If you do have, oh, here we go. What is the scan output file format?
So the
So
scan.
today, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No, Arun, it's far more practical for you to talk about it.
Right. So, the output format that we use today is a .tiff format, but there are multiple configurations that OPEX has, and Jeff, I'll let you speak about it. That you can actually create different formats as well.
Yeah. So from an image standpoint, it's usually .tiff. It can be .jpeg for sure. It's a duplex output, meaning front and back of the document, and then along with those images, for each image captured, each batch captured, each envelope captured, there's a whole series of detailed metadata, including what scanner it came from and what operator was running the machine at the time. So there's a wide range of outputs, everything from 200 DPI black and white to 300 DPI grayscale. In many cases, we're able to do color on the fly as well.
Are there any OCR, ICR, AI technologies being leveraged in the process?
So the scanner capability, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, does have the ability to read microlines. So that's a built-in component if you need that micro component. We do have the ability to capture OCR scan lines, but we rely on the downstream software to do any full page ICR or any full page OCR components as might be necessary to determine various form types. The qualification to that, I will say, is that if there are barcodes on any documents, if there are unique markings that we can determine document type, then we do have a bit of AI built into the scanner to determine document types at the time of scanning.
What do you do with the paper originals, and what is the daily volume of scans?
Arun?
All right, sure. So as part of our scan process, the paper originals, one is your regular paper, which goes back into I would say, the return feeder. Then we also have the outsort bins, which would, say, for example, you want checks out from the regular doc set, that can be weeded out. At times, you may get original documents like a death certificate or something like that. That can also be weeded out. Now, when we start scanning, we would actually, and we do have configured workflows in terms of what product line are we scanning, or if there is a differentiation that we want to build in while at scan time. Now, based on that, the document gets or the envelope gets an audit trail imprinted, and we can actually configure which box number does this document follow through. And at the scan station itself, we would have multiple archival boxes. And as soon as, say, for example, I'm done with product line A, I would, pile up all the pages post scanning into that particular box. I know that product B is also in the fray. I will then, take that volume and stack it up in a box. Now, because the entire audit trail is configured at scan time, we are able to utilize the physical record management module, which is integrated within OnBase, to define where that archival box is going to go and sit. So you can talk about which warehouse, you can talk about within the warehouse, which aisle, which rack or which shelf, and on that particular shelf, which row does that box sit, and you can actually also define what is the page count in that particular box, and all that can be done with the configuration of both OPEX as well as OnBase's for physical record management, and that's how today we manage our post scanning document archival or our long-term archival, and it also helps us to do QC, because we do a lot of butterfly audits, I would say, to make sure that all the documents that were there in the input has been scanned and has made it through the imaging system. So that validation, all the QC work is enabled through the physical record management module.
So Arun, speaking of OnBase, what module are you using for indexing?
So we do have the capture module as well as the user interface integrated within OnBase as part of our end-to-end workflow. So we do have document capture. We do have the Unity clients and the user interface that comes with the workflow.
Thank you. How is the document metadata being set?
Right. So, okay, Jeff, go ahead.
So again, just taking a guess, and I'll give it back to Arun here in a second. The question is referring to how is the metadata being set? It's automated in most cases. In other words, once the scanner identifies it as being a page, it is identified as a page to the system, and within the metadata, we're talking about a very detailed level of tracking as it relates to the data on that document. So if it came out of an envelope, the envelope is identified as being the first envelope that is being scanned, or the second, or the fifth, or the 25th. And then inside of the envelope, there is a subsequent tree of the information that is inside of that envelope, front and back of document 1, front and back of document 2. And that metadata is designed within the OPEX system. We call it certain scan. It comes out automatically. So every time we finish a transaction, which would be the contents of an envelope, or anytime we finish the contents of a file folder, or some other designation of what ends a batch, all of that metadata comes out as an XML file. It's a very open file format that we then pass along to the OnBase system.
Now, Jeff, along those lines, you had mentioned before that the scan process can convert to TIFFs. Can it also generate a searchable PDF?
Yes, it can. So the basic functionalities of the scanner are obviously the TIFF and the JPEGs, but we do have a onboard program that can take and transform those documents into searchable PDF or any other kind of PDF document that goes out the back. We're constantly making improvements to the output type because we're being asked by customers, as Arun is every day, hey, can you do this? And so we're constantly making improvements to the type of output, including PDF. So yes to the PDF question.
So I understand you're using the Falcon Red for incoming mail, but can you use the unit for other non-mail documents?
Arun, I'll give you that one.
Yeah, so we can certainly use, for non-mail documents, because, there are times when we would get a physical evidence, or say, for example, a compact disk or a USB and things like that. So, Falcon workstation does come with certain enhancements. So you can even attach a DSLR camera to the scan station, and again, at the same scan unit, you can actually take a picture and then get it integrated within the scan workflow. So to answer your question, yes, we can certainly utilize it for non-mail items as well.
And I'll add to say that there's a couple of 3 or 4 different feed modes on the Falcon scanner itself. So let's set the mail opener aside for a second. Let's turn the scanner on, and let's feed by dropping a stack of already prepared documents. That can be done at that scanner. We can set a mode that we're going to be opening small packets of information that might be inside of file folders already, and then we can scan at the file folder level. So yes, the scanner can be used separately from the mail opening unit and bring those necessary scans into the same workflow system.
That was our last question from the audience. I'll give a couple more minutes here in case anybody else had any other questions. While we're waiting for that, you can see on the screen contact information for both Jeff and Arun in case you had questions you wanted to follow up with either one. Okay, one last question. What was the daily volume of scanning documents, pages, etc.?
So the project that we were looking at that point of time, we were talking about close to, I would say, 6,000 plus envelopes, and then approximately, I would say, 50 in a range of 15 to 20,000 pages per day.
And that was for the one client, right? So over 6,000 envelopes, and then another certain percentage of regular documents for that one client.
Right, correct.
Okay, well those are all of our questions for today. Many thanks to both you, Jeff and Arun, for providing such a in-depth discussion today on how most efficiently to process your documents. And again, contact information for both Jeff and Arun is available in case you do have additional questions. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.